Have you ever wondered what people reached for in the dark quiet of the Middle Ages? When pain surged, fear rose, or dreams felt a little too close? Imagine sitting by a flickering torch as someone slides a tiny pouch across the table and tells you it can change the way you see the night. Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into a world lit only by trembling candles and the soft scrape of wooden shutters in the wind. Where medieval nights stretch long and silence holds a weight you can almost feel pressing at your shoulders. You step into that stillness now, breathing air thick with smoke, damp stone, and the faint scent of herbs crushed earlier in the day. And somewhere in this darkness, you begin to sense the subtle presence of the strange remedies and whispered potions that shaped how people slept, healed, dreamed, and sometimes drifted beyond the edges of ordinary perception. It's comforting in a way until you remember that medical knowledge is, well, let's just say you probably wouldn't survive the century without at least 3 lucky miracles. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere far away, tell me your location and the local time. This little community loves seeing where everyone drifts off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start by easing your footsteps along a narrow street, worn smooth by centuries of boots and hooves. The night is unusually quiet, as if the village itself has exhaled and settled. Medieval evenings can feel unexpectedly expansive, the world shrinking to whatever you can see in the cone of light cast by a single flame. You notice how different the sounds are. No engines, no neon buzz, just the distant bleat of a sheep, the murmur of someone telling a bedtime story through thin walls, and the faint clink of metal coming from a cottage where a healer prepares for tomorrow's work. People depend on these quiet hours more than they admit. Daytime is crowded. Markets, livestock, repairs, fieldwork, and a constant churn of minor crises made worse by the lack of proper sanitation. But at night, stillness becomes its own kind of medicine. You feel that as you walk. Your breathing slows, your shoulders ease, and you start to imagine how different your own sleep rituals might be if electricity vanished and you had nothing but fire to tame the dark. You pass a home where someone is boiling valerian root, its earthy, tangy scent drifting into the road. In the Middle Ages, valerian is a common relaxation herb, used for anxiety, insomnia, and the general stress of surviving everything from famine to questionable stew. That's one of the funny realities you discover here. While medieval medicine is notorious for bloodletting, leeches, and theories about humors swirling inside your body like moody roommates, many of their sleep remedies still appear in modern teas. You're drinking the same stuff minus, hopefully, any surprise beetles. A dog trots past you, tail swishing like a lazy broom, then pauses to stare as if assessing whether you're friend, foe, or simply strange. You give a polite nod. The dog decides you're boring and continues on. Your eyes drift upward to the sky, star-rich, impossibly clear. Without city lights, the night becomes a kind of cosmic ceiling, a glowing map of myths everyone here knows by heart. You can almost feel why people in this age believe the heavens influence everything. Moods, crops, even dreams. One mainstream historical fact you remember. Medieval communities often scheduled medical treatments based on lunar cycles, believing certain operations or herbs worked better under specific moon phases. It sounds mystical now, but when your world is ruled by natural rhythms, patterns feel like lifelines. You keep walking, and the houses gradually thin until the path curves toward a small clearing. The grass here is cool under your feet, damp from evening dew, and you hear the subtle rustle of someone approaching. A figure steps into the dim glow, an herb wife, her basket half filled with leaves and roots she gathered before light faded. She nods once, not startled. Travelers at night are part of the landscape. Without speaking, she shows you a sprig of something green and sharply aromatic. Mint, perhaps, or something stronger, something used for pain relief or easing troubled minds. The herb wife represents a quirky truth about medieval life. Many healers operate quietly on the edges of society, respected but also whispered about. Some villagers consider them essential, others fear they might know too much. And while many of their remedies are harmless, Some blend into the shadowy space between medicine and superstition. Historians still argue whether herbwives were genuinely skilled practitioners or simply lucky with patterns they observed, but evidence suggests many had real botanical knowledge passed through generations. The line between wisdom and rumor is thin, and you feel yourself walking it right now. You thank her silently as she slips away toward a cottage with a thatched roof and smoke curling like a sleepy serpent into the night. You imagine her evening routine: drying herbs above the hearth, grinding ingredients with a mortar that has seen more seasons than any living villager, preparing poultices for everything from sore backs to night terrors. If you lived here, you'd probably visit her often, and not just to buy chamomile. People come for advice, for hope, for anything that promises a little peace. But peace is a rare commodity. The night hides anxieties as much as it soothes them. You overhear two men standing by a fence, whispering anxiously about an illness that swept through the next village. No one knows what causes it. Bad air, angry spirits, spoiled grain? You catch a word that feels familiar: humors. The medieval belief in for humors, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile, explains almost every ailment in this world. If you're sad, you have too much black bile. If you're feverish, you're too hot inside. It's a biological balancing act, like a cosmic scoreboard, and you're always one sneeze away from tipping the scale. You slip past them and continue toward a hill overlooking the entire settlement. From here, the houses glow faintly like resting embers. You feel a sense of connection, as if the whole village is breathing one slow, heavy breath in preparation for sleep. And you sense something else, an undercurrent, a curiosity, a collective habit of turning to small substances to soften reality. Whether it's calming herbs, strong drink, or whispered potions, medieval nights are full of quiet experiments. You rest your hand on the cool stone of a low wall. The wind brushes past you, carrying the smell of smoke from someone's hearth and the faint sweetness of mead waiting in a cup somewhere. You let your mind drift, understanding now why medieval people rely on little boosts of comfort. Life is hard, unpredictable, and often harsh. A soothing drink or sleep-inducing herb isn't indulgence. It's survival. And as you stand on that hill, the night deepening around you, you begin to sense the shadows of the substances that will soon guide you farther: roots, brews, powders, and potions that flicker between medicine and mystery, between healing and escape. This world is opening, and you're only taking your first steps inside it. You step down from the quiet hill and move toward the soft glow of a distant cottage, drawn by the faint clatter of clay jars and the earthy perfume of crushed leaves. The path narrows, lined with low hedges and tangled vines that brush at your sleeves like curious fingers. This is where the herbwives keep their hidden gardens, the quiet sanctuaries where medieval remedies are born. You feel the air change as you walk closer, turning warmer, thicker, as if even the night knows to tread lightly here. The first thing you notice is the gate. Hand-carved, slightly crooked, and draped with bunches of drying lavender. You push it open, and a soft creak breaks the silence. Beyond it lies a little kingdom of green shadows, rows of plants arranged in careful patches, each whispering its own usefulness. Chamomile, mint, feverfew, wormwood, sage. These gardens aren't just for healing. They're for coping, for sleeping, for smoothing the edges of days that demand everything from the people who live them. You kneel beside a narrow row of comfrey, its leaves broad and slightly fuzzy. A mainstream historical fact floats up. Many medieval healers used comfrey to treat broken bones, so much so that it earned the nickname knit bone. Today, it's banned in many places for internal use because it can harm the liver. Funny how something that once saved limbs now comes with warning labels. Time doesn't change the plants. It just changes our relationship with them. Somewhere behind the rows, you hear a rustle, a purposeful movement, not an animal. A herb wife steps into view, hands stained green, apron smudged with soil, hair escaping its braid like smoke curling from a chimney. She sees you but doesn't react with surprise. People wander into her world all the time, seeking relief, hope, or answers that lie somewhere between the leaves. She gestures for you to follow. She leads you to a sheltered corner where jars rest in neat rows, each filled with something different. Dried petals, powdered roots, strange little seeds that look like they might whisper if you held them close enough. One jar contains crushed poppy seeds, another powdered yarrow, another something darker. Maybe mandrake chips or henbane leaves. Risky but treasured when used correctly. She pulls down a small pouch tied with twine. When she opens it, a sharply sweet smell lifts into the air. Lemon balm. You rub some between your fingers, and the scent brightens the night like a tiny sun. She signs with her hands, a gentle motion, suggesting calm, rest, ease. This herb is often brewed before sleep. She indicates, to relax the mind and loosen the knotted thoughts that keep people awake. You nod, inhaling again. As you explore, you notice something tucked behind the jars. A bundle of dried red berries. Rowan berries. A quirky tidbit many people forget. Rowan trees were believed to protect against witchcraft and nightmares. Sometimes the berries were strung around a child's bed or dried and powdered into sleep charms. Whether it worked or not, who knows? But you can imagine a frightened mother grinding those berries by moonlight, praying the spirits would stay away from her child. The herb wife motions toward a large wooden mortar, its inside stained a mix of colors from years of use. She drops in a few sprigs of something that looks harmless until she crushes it, and a musky, resinous scent hits you. This is Betterney, once called the plant that drives away devils. Medieval people used it for headaches, anxiety, and, according to some old texts, even protection from sorcery. Historians still argue whether these attributions were symbolic or if people genuinely believed Betterney created a barrier between them and the supernatural. Standing here, surrounded by strange shadows, you can almost understand the impulse. You move deeper into the garden where plants glow dimly under the moon. The herb wife kneels beside a patch of valerian. She traces its stems, showing you how the root is where the strength lies. She digs carefully and passes you a piece. The root smells like old socks, no way around it, but it's still prized for calming racing hearts and anxious minds. You imagine someone drinking valerian tea after a rough day only to mutter, "Well, it works, but it smells like my cousin's laundry." That's medieval life for you. Comfort sometimes coming with a side of inconvenience. A breeze drifts through, carrying with it the faint, peppery scent of rue. This sharp, bitter herb stands out from the softer scents around it. Rue is complicated, used medicinally, but also symbolically associated with regret and sorrow. People wore it for protection against plague, evil spirits, and unwanted influences. You can almost picture a medieval parent dabbing rue oil on their child's forehead before sending them into the world, hoping the herb's bitterness would keep danger at bay. It's both protective and poetic, a plant that straddles practicality and superstition. The herb wife taps your arm and points toward a small fenced-off patch. Inside are plants with fuzzy, silvery leaves, mugwort. She gives you a knowing look. Mugwort is famous for enhancing dreams, easing anxiety, and sometimes encouraging vivid, almost lucid visions. Travelers burned it to stay awake on long journeys, but others placed it under their pillows to slip into deeper, stranger dreams. You think of your own dreams and wonder how different they'd feel with this herb tucked nearby. She brings you inside her cottage next, where bunches of herbs hang from the beams like upside-down chandeliers. The air is warm, fragrant, layered with scents that have soaked into these walls for decades. On the table lies a leather-bound book, pages filled with scrawled recipes and drawings of plants. You recognize some, but others look like sketches from a dream. Strange roots with curling tendrils, flowers shaped like tiny bells, berries that seem a little too shiny. She flips to a page showing a simple infusion for easing grief. Rose petals, honey, lavender, warm water. You watch her prepare it with steady hands, the kind of hands that have comforted dozens of people through nights when sadness presses too heavily on their chests. Medieval remedies weren't always about survival. Sometimes they were about soothing the emotional bruises life left behind. As she pours the warm infusion into a cup for you, a soft glow fills the room, and for a moment the world feels suspended. Outside, a night owl hoots. In the distance, someone closes a wooden shutter. You sip the drink, letting the floral sweetness settle on your tongue. You realize something quietly profound. These herb wives aren't just healers. They're guardians of the night, protectors of dreams, keepers of calm in a world that rarely offers any. And as you step back out into the darkness, the hidden gardens behind you seem to hum with life, waiting for the next weary soul seeking a little comfort before drifting into sleep. You move away from the herbwife's quiet garden, following a narrow trail that winds between sleeping cottages and low stone walls. The air shifts again, cooler now, tinged with the faint scent of beeswax and old parchment. Ahead, a row of tall cypress trees stands like silent guardians. Beyond them rises the dark silhouette of a monastery, its bell tower carved against the night sky. You feel drawn toward it, not by sound or movement, but by the steady sense of ritual that seems to emanate from its stone walls. This is where the monastic pharmacies work their quiet midnight magic. You approach the heavy wooden gate, which stands slightly ajar. No guards, no challenge, just a soft creak as you step inside the courtyard. Monasteries at night feel like the world's heartbeat has slowed, everything deliberate, measured, and infused with calm. A candle flickers in a narrow window, and its glow spills across the flagstones like a warm hand inviting you forward. A robed figure appears, slow-moving, purposeful, neither startled nor suspicious. The monk nods once, as if he's been expecting you, then gestures for you to follow. You pass through an arched hallway where the stone is cool enough to raise goosebumps on your arms. The only sounds are your footsteps, the rustle of fabric, and somewhere far off, the turning of pages. He leads you to a door reinforced with iron bands. When he pushes it open, a subtle cloud of herbal fragrance flows out. Sweet marjoram, sharp rosemary, bitter wormwood, and something warm and resinous you can't quite name. This is the monastic pharmacy, the medieval precursor to a chemistry lab, a library, and a doctor's office all woven together. Rows of shelves stretch from floor to ceiling, each lined with clay jars marked in careful Latin script. A mainstream historical fact settles in your mind. Monasteries preserved and copied ancient medical texts, including works by Galen and Dioscorides, which became the backbone of European medicine for centuries. Without monks, much ancient pharmaceutical knowledge might have disappeared entirely. You run your fingers lightly across the spines of several manuscript scrolls, feeling the faint ridges of handwritten ink beneath your touch. The monk motions toward a long wooden table where several tools lie arranged with ritual precision. Mortar and pestle, bronze scales, tiny knives for slicing roots, a steel rasp for grinding harder substances. He picks up the mortar and drops in a few dried poppy husks, grinding slowly until they become a soft beige powder. You watch the rhythmic motion. It's oddly soothing, almost hypnotic, and you realize that these late-night preparations are probably just as calming for the monks as the remedies are for the people who receive them. He hands you a small pouch of the crushed mixture. This is used for pain relief, he gestures, especially during harsh winters or after long days of fieldwork. Not enough to cause harm, just enough to ease someone into rest. It's a responsible dosage, the kind that reminds you monks had a surprisingly regulated relationship with substances that could easily be abused. Healing was viewed as a sacred duty, and any misuse would weigh on their conscience like an anchor. You continue exploring the shelves. One jar contains crushed mint leaves, vibrant even in the dim light. Another holds dried rose petals, dusty but still fragrant. And then you spot something unexpected. A vial of what looks like dried slices of orange peel. The monk nods when you pick it up. A quirky tidbit whispers through your thoughts. Citrus wasn't common in many parts of medieval Europe, but monasteries cultivated rare fruits whenever possible. Sometimes in tiny, sheltered orchards warmed by cloister walls. Dried citrus peel was used for digestion, clarity of mind, and sometimes simply because monks enjoyed the scent in a world full of less pleasant smells. Your guide leads you to a heavy-bound book left open on a lectern. Its illuminated letters shimmer in gold leaf, catching the candlelight like tiny suns. The page shows a meticulous diagram of plants with roots branching like veins. The words describe a sleep draught made from honeyed wine, valerian, and a pinch of saffron, extravagant and expensive. Only nobles or monasteries wealthy enough to trade for Eastern spices could afford such a mixture. You look up at the monk, and he shrugs, a tiny smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. The joke is silent but clear. Even back then, good sleep came at a cost. He gestures to another table where incense burns in a slow spiral, filling the room with a warm, woody aroma. Frankincense, used during prayer, but also known for calming troubled minds. The smoke curls upward like a soft sigh, and you follow its movement, feeling your own breathing fall into its rhythm. Nearby stands a large copper cauldron resting over faint embers. The monk stirs it with a wooden paddle. The mixture inside is thick, dark, and bubbling lazily. You lean closer. It smells faintly of honey, wine, and something sharp, maybe metasweet. He scoops a little into a cup and lets you smell it. This potion is brewed to soothe fevers and dull pain, meant for the villagers who come knocking on the monastery door at dawn, desperate for relief. Still, not everything here is so soothing. The monk leads you to a locked cabinet, its front carved with intricate patterns. He unlocks it slowly, reverently. Inside lie jars filled with substances that shimmer oddly even in low light. Dried foxglove leaves, crushed monkshood, a vial of powdered mandrake root. These are dangerous remedies, powerful enough to cure, powerful enough to harm. Historians still argue whether monks understood the full toxicity of these plants or simply used traditional recipes without question. But the fact remains. Medieval medicine walked a razor's edge, and the monks were balancing on it daily. A sudden gust of wind rattles the shutters, making one jar tremble on its shelf. The monk catches it with a speed that surprises you. He sets it back down with a soft exhale, then gives you a look that says, "If anything breaks, we're both in trouble." You stifle a laugh. He takes you through a small door into a garden enclosed by high stone walls. Moonlight pools across raised beds of herbs, sage, thyme, mint, borage, and plants arranged like careful mosaics. The garden feels almost holy, a place where scent and silence share the same breath. You kneel beside a patch of borage, its blue flowers glowing faintly. The monk plucks one and places it in your palm. Borage was believed to bring courage, he indicates. Knights sometimes drank wine flavored with it before battle, hoping its strength would seep into their bones. You look up and notice how the monastery seems to cradle this space, shielding it from harsh winds. Here, everything grows safely. Even the more dangerous plants feel less threatening. As you stand, the monk guides you back inside, and you sense the steady heartbeat of the monastery again. The quiet industry of minds dedicated to preserving knowledge, easing suffering, and offering small escapes from the pains of medieval life. You thank him silently as he leads you to the exit, the scent of herbs lingering behind you like a gentle hand on your shoulder. And as you step back into the cool night, you feel something shift. A deeper understanding of how these monastic pharmacies shaped the medieval world, one careful pinch of powder at a time. You follow the monastery's stone path back toward the village, but the night is livelier now, humming softly as if waking from its own long silence. The air grows warmer, tinged with the aromas of cooking fires, animal musk, and, unexpectedly, something sharper, spicier, almost metallic. You let your senses guide you down a narrow lane that spills suddenly into an open space. The village market, still half alive even after dusk. Torches flicker in iron brackets, casting long, jittery shadows over the stalls. You hear voices, soft negotiation, laughter muffled by fatigue, and the clink of tiny metal scoops as merchants measure powders from jars. This is a different world from the monastic calm you just left. Here, the atmosphere feels raw, pulsing with human need and curiosity. You step into the uneven circle of torchlight and immediately notice the colors. Deep reds of paprika-like spices, earthy greens of crushed herbs, rich browns that hint at distant, warmer climates. The scents bloom all around you, weaving into a tapestry of aromas both inviting and dangerous. A man with a crooked hat waves you over to his stall. His table is cluttered with small pouches tied in string, each one labeled with a symbol instead of a name. Some scratched hastily, others carefully inked. He holds up a pouch filled with a golden brown powder and lets you smell. The scent is warm and resinous, like a mix between cinnamon and something smoky. Before you can ask, he taps his temple and grins. This one, he implies, helps keep nightmares away. Whether that's true or just excellent marketing, you can't tell. Merchants have always known how to dress a simple herb in the clothing of magic. You move along, drawn next to a stall illuminated by a lantern that swings slightly in the night breeze. The woman behind it handles her goods with surprising gentleness. On her table lie bowls filled with dried petals, strips of bark, crushed seeds, and oddly shaped roots that look like tiny sleeping beings. She picks up a root shaped like a crooked finger and snaps a small piece off. She offers it to you. When you smell it, your nose tingles, sharp, biting. Mustard root, used for clearing congestion, soothing aches, and, according to her gestures, waking up foggy minds after too much wine. Medieval nightlife, it seems, has its own little recovery plan. A mainstream historical fact surfaces. Medieval markets often had sections dedicated to spices and herbs brought through long trade routes, linking Europe to the Middle East and beyond. Substances like saffron, pepper, and cinnamon were worth more than gold. Some were used in food, others in medicine, and some, like nutmeg, were believed to protect against plague. You take in the bustling scene again and realize you're standing in the crossroads of an ancient global network. A web of trade carried on the backs of camels, ships, and very determined merchants. A sudden burst of laughter draws your attention. A group of young men sits near a barrel, passing around a small wooden box. One of them opens it to reveal what looks like dried leaves mixed with tiny red berries. They're not eating it. They're just inhaling, deeply, theatrically. One coughs and everyone laughs harder. You lean closer, catching the earthy scent of crushed juniper. A quirky tidbit dances into your thoughts. Some medieval folks believed inhaling strong spices or herbs could clear negative humors from the body. Others just liked the heady rush that came from sniffing something potent. Humans haven't changed much. You continue wandering until you find a stall that feels different, quieter, darker. The merchant is older, with deep-set eyes that seem to track everything at once. He gestures slowly, inviting you into a small circle of hanging herbs. His table is mostly jars containing powders in unusual colors, soft gray, muted purple, even pale blue. He lifts a jar of crushed violet petals and sprinkles a little on your palm. Violet was used to calm the heart, he explains through gestures, to soothe grief and slow the rhythm of anxiety. You rub the powder gently, surprised at how delicate it feels. But not everything on his table is gentle. He reaches for a jar filled with tiny black seeds and hesitates before removing the lid. When he does, the scent is bitter, almost medicinal. Black henbane seeds. He taps a warning on the table. Dangerous. Used in very small amounts. Good for easing pain, terrible in the wrong hands. Historians still argue whether substances like henbane were used more often for healing or for inducing trance-like states in certain rituals. But standing here, the line seems blurred, one step from relief to hallucination. He points to a small wooden box with an iron clasp. When he opens it, you see something gleaming faintly in the torchlight. A tiny lump of resin, amber-like, honey-colored. He gestures theatrically, mimicking someone staring dreamily into the distance. You recognize it as possibly storax or frankincense resin, burned for its scent, appreciated for its calming effects, and sometimes used to elevate the mind, as some early texts put it. The merchant taps your wrist, raising a brow as if asking whether you want some. You decline politely. You're not ready to drift off walking. A sudden call distracts you. A woman selling roasted nuts dusted with cinnamon and something that smells suspiciously like powdered valerian. She claims it helps people relax during long winter nights. You laugh under your breath. Medieval people would hide sleep herbs in anything: wine, broth, bread, even snacks. If it tasted good and made you sleepy, it was considered a win. As you weave deeper into the market, the torches throw more dramatic shadows, making every stall feel like its own little world. You stop at a booth covered in tiny glass bottles sealed with wax. The merchant, a tall, wiry man with bright eyes, shakes one bottle lightly. Inside is a thick, red liquid. He gestures to his throat and mimes shouting. Voice tonic. For singers, criers, and anyone whose daily life demands yelling across courtyards or ordering farmhands around. You imagine medieval parents wishing they had access to this after a day of keeping track of 6 kids and a goat. He sets the bottle down and picks up another filled with fine gray dust. He mimes sprinkling it into a drink. You lean closer. It smells faintly of licorice and smoke. He's selling a stimulant tonic, mild by modern standards but popular among travelers and merchants who must stay awake through long nights. It's made from crushed fennel, dried parsley root, and a pinch of black pepper. You consider how little it takes to feel alert in a world without caffeine-loaded sodas. As you turn, you notice a young boy grinding something with a small hand mill. You watch the powder gather in the bowl. Pale yellow, lightweight. He smiles shyly and lets you try a pinch. Tastes bitter, way more bitter than you expect. He points to his temples. For headaches, he mimes. Feverfew. Still used today. You nod, impressed by the continuity of healing traditions. The market slowly begins to wind down. Torches burn lower, conversations fade, and merchants tie their goods with practiced motions. You step back, taking in the final swirl of scents before the night swallows them. The warmth of the crowd slips behind you as you move toward quieter paths again. And as you walk away, you realize just how strange and wondrous medieval marketplaces truly were. Not only places of trade, but places of transformation, where a simple pouch of powder could promise courage, comfort, clarity, or even the mild distortion of reality. You breathe deeply, letting the last traces of spice and smoke linger on your senses as you continue deeper into the medieval night. You leave the fading lights of the market behind, stepping into a quieter stretch of the village where the night grows thick and velvety. The air changes again, warmer now, tinged with sweetness as though someone nearby has uncorked a bottle of something rich and inviting. You follow that scent instinctively, curious, until you reach a row of cottages nestled close together like old friends leaning in for gossip. From one open doorway spills a golden glow and the unmistakable sound of a cork popping. A soft laugh follows, relieved, tired, familiar. You step closer just as a woman pulls a jug from a clay shelf, its sides sticky with dried honey. This is mead, the gentle heart of medieval drinking culture, and tonight, it seems to be flowing freely. She sees you and waves you in with the easy warmth of someone who doesn't mind company, especially if the night is cool and the jug is full. Inside, the room is small but cozy. A fire crackles in the hearth, casting amber light over rough wooden walls and bunches of herbs hanging from the beams. The woman pours you a cup of mead, its color warm as sunlight trapped in liquid. You take a cautious sip. It tastes like fermented summer. Honey, wildflowers, a hint of spice, and an afterglow that lingers in your chest. It's soothing, gently intoxicating, and unexpectedly comforting. Medieval people relied on drinks like this more than you might think. A mainstream historical fact drifts through your mind. In many places, water wasn't always safe to drink. Alcohol, especially light mead or ale, offered a safer option, mildly disinfected through fermentation. And so drinking wasn't just a pastime, it was part of survival. The woman adds a twig of rosemary to her own mug and stirs thoughtfully. You realize she isn't drinking to forget or escape. She's drinking to unwind, to soften the roughness of a day lived without the ease of modern comfort. Even a mild drink can melt tension when your life is constant physical labor. She gestures toward the hearth, where a small clay pot sits warming on the stone ledge. She opens it and a warm, fruity smell fills the room. Mulled wine, steeped with cinnamon, cloves, maybe even a scrap of orange peel. You raise an eyebrow. She grins. It's a luxury, she explains through gestures. Something she prepares only on special nights or when visitors arrive. And here she is, offering you a taste, as though your arrival marks a small celebration. You sip the wine, and the heat of it blooms through your senses, wrapping you like a shawl. No wonder medieval travelers adored mulled wine. It warms the body, calms the mind, and mutes the sounds of a harsh world for a little while. As you sit by the fire, she pulls out a small wooden box and places it carefully on the table. Inside are dried herbs tied with thin string, some familiar, some mysterious. She picks up a small pouch stamped with a crude drawing of a bee. Honey-soaked herbs. She breaks off a tiny piece and offers it to you. The taste is sweet at first, then floral, then strangely cooling. This blend, she indicates, is used to relax people who struggle to sleep after long days working in the fields. Mead may take the edge off, but these herbs seal the deal. A quirky tidbit floats into your mind. Some medieval people believed that drinking a mixture of mead and crushed herbs could help them see visions or communicate with angels. Whether that was the herbs or the optimism talking, you can't say. But you imagine someone sitting exactly where you sit, sipping a potent cup and waiting for divine insights that may or may not have been purely botanical in origin. The woman excuses herself for a moment and returns with something wrapped in cloth. She unwraps it slowly. Inside lies a chunk of something dark, glossy, slightly sticky. You lean in. It's propolis, a resin gathered by bees, thought to have healing properties. She gestures to her throat and chest. Good for coughs. Then she mimes rubbing it on her skin. Good for wounds. You nod, fascinated. Propolis is still used today in natural remedies. It's one of those substances time never quite lets go of. She pours you another sip of mead, just a little, and you realize why this drink is beloved. It's not harsh, not overwhelming. It eases you into a gentle float, like slipping into warm water. You feel your shoulders drop, your thoughts slow. Even the fire seems to breathe more softly. You thank her for her hospitality and step back outside. The night embraces you, warm and sweet from the lingering honey. You walk slowly, almost reluctantly, letting the mead settle into your bloodstream as you follow a path that leads toward the river. At the riverbank, you find a group of villagers huddled around a glowing lantern. They're sharing a jug of something lighter than mead, maybe ale or small beer. The drink looks thin but frothy. You take a sip when they offer it. It tastes earthy and mildly sour. Not strong but refreshing, almost hydrating. And that's when you recall another mainstream detail. Small beer was common even for children, often safer than water and containing just enough alcohol to prevent spoilage. One of the villagers leans in conspiratorially and pulls out a little pouch. He pours a pinch of dried herbs into the beer. You take a cautious sniff. Nettle and yarrow, mixed with something minty. A stimulant blend, something to wake the senses and keep people alert during night watches or long conversations. You smile. Medieval people clearly understood the power of customizing their drinks. Starbucks would be proud. The conversation around the lantern drifts between stories, some real, some exaggerated. One man claims he once drank honey wine infused with a mysterious Eastern spice that made colors glow brighter. Then he laughs and admits it might have simply been the fact he hadn't eaten enough that day. Historians still argue whether many such tales were the result of exotic herbs or empty stomachs and creative storytelling. You sit with them for a little while, letting the soft buzz of conversation mix with the soft buzz of mead still warming your chest. The river whispers at the edges of your senses. Fireflies flare briefly, then vanish like tiny sparks of thought. Everything feels slow, safe, comfortably blurred. Finally, when the jug runs dry, you stand and continue walking along the riverbank. The sweetness of earlier sips stays on your tongue. You realize now that medieval people didn't drink simply to get drunk, although that certainly happened. More often, they drank to soothe themselves through nights filled with unknowns. Pain, danger, superstition, loss. Life was relentless. Mead and wine offered a soft buffer, a way to loosen fear's grip just enough to breathe. As you leave the river behind, a final warmth spreads through your senses. Not intoxication, just a gentle reminder that even in the Middle Ages, comfort could be coaxed from simple ingredients. Honey, herbs, warmth, and the gentle hum of shared company. You follow the curve of the river until the soft sweetness of mead begins to fade from your senses, replaced by something deeper, earthier, darker, almost sorrowful. The air grows heavier as you leave the friendly clusters of lanterns behind and slip into a quieter part of the village where the homes sit farther apart and the shadows pool like ink. A faint smell drifts through the night, bittersweet and unmistakable once you recognize it. The scent of poppy resin. Not the bright red flowers you might imagine waving in summer fields, but something denser, more concentrated. Something that once traveled hidden inside spice caravans and merchant crates. You keep walking until you see a modest cottage with its shutters half closed. In the glow leaking through the slats, you glimpse a figure hunched over a wooden table, grinding something with slow, deliberate motions. The door is open just a crack, and curiosity nudges you forward. When you tap gently, the figure looks up. A thin, middle-aged man with dark circles under his eyes and a calmness that doesn't quite hide his exhaustion. He waves you in, as if he has expected company even at this hour. Inside, the room smells of herbs, lamp oil, and something warm and smoky that clings to the air. He gestures toward the mortar and you peer inside. The powder is pale brown, fine as sand. He pinches a bit and holds it beneath your nose. The scent is faint but recognizable. Crushed poppy husk, the remnants left after extracting sticky resin. Not opium in the potent form that would one day reshape empires, but something milder, used in tiny doses for pain relief or, occasionally, for coaxing troubled minds toward sleep. He mimes rubbing his back and grimaces. Hard day in the fields. You nod. Painkillers weren't easy to come by, and this gentle preparation was one of the few accessible options. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind. Medieval physicians used poppy derivatives in carefully measured amounts, often combined with wine or honey to soothe pain from injuries, childbirth, or chronic illness. The dosages were intentionally weak, strong enough to numb discomfort, not enough to plunge someone into dangerous stupor. Still, the poppy carried an aura of mystery. People respected it, feared it, relied on it. Too much and you might slip into a dream you never return from. The man scoops a small amount into a cloth and ties it neatly with twine. He gestures for you to follow him outside, where he kneels beside a wooden bench and places the cloth into a small cup of warm wine. He explains through gestures that this infusion is often used after long days of backbreaking work. You watch the powder swirl, tinting the liquid a soft caramel shade. When he hands the cup to you to smell, you sense the warmth and mild sweetness beneath a bitter edge. He shakes his head. This one isn't for you. It's too personal, too precious. You simply nod and appreciate the trust. As he works, a quirky tidbit surfaces. Some medieval folktales claimed that poppies grew where soldiers died, nourished by the spilled life beneath the soil. That strange blend of grief and beauty gave the flower an almost spiritual significance. Later eras would turn that imagery into powerful symbols, but the seed of that idea existed even now. You glance at the small bowl of seeds beside the man and wonder if he ever thinks of such stories while he crushes the husks. He motions for you to sit on the bench, and while he prepares his mixture, he reveals a few more of his tools. A slender knife for scoring the poppy pods when they are fresh. A curved spoon carved from bone. A tiny scale made of wood and bronze, so delicate it trembles in the faint breeze. He places a weighed portion onto the scale to show you how precise he must be. Too little and it does nothing. Too much and it could cause dizziness, confusion, or risk of passing out. Historians still argue whether medieval people truly understood dosage or simply relied on tradition and experience, but watching him measure with quiet devotion, you suspect that at least some healers knew exactly what they were doing. As he finishes steeping the drink, another figure appears at the doorway, a young woman clutching her wrist. She sits gingerly beside the man, offering a shy nod to you. He examines her hand carefully, then reaches for a small jar on a shelf. The resin inside glistens softly in the firelight. He scoops out a tiny amount and mixes it with olive oil until it becomes a thick, amber paste. When he applies it to her wrist, she sighs with relief, her shoulders dropping as tension melts from her posture. You watch the exchange and understand something profound. Poppy wasn't just a way to escape pain. It was a way to survive life's relentless demands. When every day was physical labor, when injuries healed slowly, when illness lingered without explanation, even a small reprieve meant everything. The man hands the woman a wrapped bundle, dried chamomile and mint, to steep later. She thanks him and slips back into the night. Once she's gone, he pulls up a stool for you and sets the poppy mixture aside. From a wooden box, he takes out another substance, dark, brittle, with a faintly sweet smell. You touch it gently. It softens slightly in the warmth of your fingers. This is poppy resin, he indicates, but older, milder, diluted by storage and time. He points toward the ceiling, miming sleep. This older resin is used only when illness brings relentless coughing, or when someone's pain keeps the entire household awake. He breaks off the tiniest piece and drops it into a bowl of warm water. The resin melts slowly, like honey reluctantly dissolving. The steam rises, carrying the faint scent of earth and bitter sweetness. He gestures for you to inhale. The vapor is soothing, opening your chest and clearing your thoughts. You understand then that substances like this weren't only internal remedies. They were inhaled, rubbed on the skin, infused into cloth, even burned to create calming smoke. A sudden gust rattles the shutters, and the man looks up sharply. Something is outside, maybe just the wind, but the sound is enough to remind you how isolated this cottage feels. He closes the door firmly and adds another log to the fire. It flares with a soft roar, illuminating the shelves lined with clay pots and dried plants. The room feels cocooned, safe, like a sanctuary against the night's long reach. He sits opposite you and pours himself a careful swallow of the warm poppy wine. Not enough to dull the senses, just enough to ease the ache in his shoulders. He gestures for you to watch how slowly he drinks it, how he respects the substance. There's no recklessness here, only necessity. You glance at his hands, calloused, steady, worn by years of labor and healing, and you imagine how many nights he has sat in this room, preparing tiny doses, comforting neighbors, soothing pain that would otherwise swallow their sleep. Another thought flickers. Medieval life often blurred the line between remedy and experience. Substances like poppy offered both relief and a brief drift away from the sharp edges of reality. You feel that now in the quiet hush of the cottage, where even the crackle of the fire sounds gentler. The man finishes his drink and places the cup aside. He nods toward you, grateful for your company, and begins cleaning his tools with a methodical care that speaks of routine. The smell of resin lingers, warm and faintly sweet, settling into your clothes like a memory. When you step outside again, the air feels cooler, sharper. The warmth of the cottage clings to you as the night stretches ahead. You walk slowly, carrying with you the understanding that the medieval world's relationship with substances was complex, rooted in need, shaped by caution, infused with both fear and gratitude. A soft breeze rustles the grass, and somewhere far off, a dog barks once, then falls silent. You continue your journey, the scent of poppy still whispering at the edges of the dark. You leave the poppy-scented air behind and continue along a dirt path that bends toward the outskirts of the village, where the night grows stranger and the shadows seem to watch with quiet expectation. The moon hangs low now, pale and heavy, casting a milky sheen across the uneven ground. As you walk, you notice a field to your left, overgrown, tangled, the sort of place villagers avoid after dusk. A thin mist hovers just above the soil like a ghost reluctant to rise. And in the center of that field, barely visible under the moon's glow, you spot a shape that makes your pulse quicken. A root, small, twisted, vaguely human in silhouette. Mandrake, the root of legends, nightmares, and whispered dangers. You step closer, curiosity outweighing caution. The plant's leaves spread low and wide, splayed like the wings of a creature crouched close to the earth. Medieval people talked about this plant as though it were alive with intention. They warned of its scream, the fatal shriek said to burst from the soil when the mandrake is pulled free. You know it's only myth, yet the silence around the plant feels loaded, heavy, as though even the air participates in the story. A figure emerges from the edge of the field, carrying a small lantern that casts a trembling circle of gold around her feet. She's older, bundled in layers of wool, her face marked by years of living close to the land. She doesn't seem startled by you. Instead, she studies the mandrake with practiced caution. She gestures for you to follow, but not too close. Her hands move like someone who has done this 100 times. She kneels by the plant and performs a small ritual you've only read about. First, she draws a circle in the dirt around it. Then she scatters a pinch of something, salt, perhaps, She takes a thin rope from her pocket and ties one end to the mandrake's leaves. The other end she fastens to a nearby stake. She steps back, far back, raising both eyebrows at you as if to say, "In case the stories are true," and with a gentle tug, she pulls the stake, dragging the root free from the soil. No scream, just a soft pop as earth gives way. Still, the tension evaporates from her shoulders, and you feel yourself laughing quietly at the drama of it all. She laughs too, a warm, crackling sound, then lifts the mandrake for you to see. The root really does resemble a tiny body with legs, arms, even what might be the suggestion of a torso. No wonder folk believed it held strange magic. A mainstream historical fact nudges its way into your thoughts. Mandrake was used by medieval physicians as a sedative, an anesthetic, and a sleep aid, especially before surgical procedures. Combined with wine, it could induce a deep, dreamlike state. Dangerous in the wrong hands, invaluable in the right ones. Even in controlled amounts, its effects bordered on hallucinogenic. You imagine lying on a wooden table, a mandrake-infused cloth pressed to your face as the world around you softens into a distant echo. Surgery becomes less unbearable. Pain becomes blurred. The woman places the root gently onto a cloth-lined basket and motions for you to walk with her. She leads you to her cottage nearby, a place lit by soft lamplight and filled with bundles of drying plants hanging from every beam. The room smells of sage, resin, and something earthy, like freshly turned soil. She sets the mandrake on the table and begins trimming small pieces from its limbs, each cut purposeful, measured. She holds up a tiny sliver of the root, warning you with a stern look that even smelling too much of it can unsettle the senses. She crushes the piece with a mortar, mixing it with warm wine until it forms a cloudy liquid. She mimes a sleeping motion with her hands. Deep, heavy slumber. She touches her stomach next and nods. Sometimes it's used for extreme pain, childbirth included. A quirky tidbit flickers through your memory. In some regions, people believed mandrakes glowed at night, or that they sprang from the ground where a hanged man's final breath touched the soil. Others claimed mandrakes whispered secrets to those who cared for them. Watching the woman handle the root with such reverence, you understand how stories like that survive. She hands you a wooden box filled with mandrake scraps, dried chips, carved shapes, tiny fragments wrapped in cloth. These aren't for ingestion, she gestures. These are talismans, charms to ward off nightmares or evil spirits. Whether they work or simply comfort those who believe in them, the effect is the same. Historians still argue whether mandrake's reputation came more from its chemical power or the folklore wrapped around it like vines. The woman pours the crushed mixture into a small cup and covers it with a cloth. This one is for a villager arriving soon, she indicates. Someone in pain, someone who cannot sleep. And despite the plant's danger, she will give them relief, because pain and fear have been louder companions in this world than superstition ever could be. You sit with her for a while, listening to the crackle of her hearth. She hums a tune low, rhythmic, soothing. You examine the shelves around you, jars of dried mandrake leaves, mixtures combining mandrake with honey, powders used sparingly enough to last months. Everything here is steeped in ritual, caution, and purpose. She shows you an older mandrake root, darkened with time, shriveled, shaped almost perfectly like a tiny man. It even has a little tuft of what looks like hair at the top. Some roots were carved intentionally to resemble human figures and sold for high prices, she explains through gestures. A detail you find both amusing and deeply human. When people want magic, carving a root is sometimes easier than waiting for nature to cooperate. You stand to leave, and she presses a small cloth pouch into your hand. You open it to find a pinch of dried mandrake leaf, not potent enough to affect you, but strong enough to carry the faint scent of the plant. A token, she implies, a reminder of caution, mystery, and respect. You tie it to your belt, feeling oddly honored. Stepping outside, the night air hits you with cool clarity. The mist still clings to the field where the mandrake once grew, but now the place seems less eerie and more sacred, like a point where myth and medicine touch fingertips. As you walk away, you think about the dual nature of the mandrake. Healer and trickster, sedative and hallucination, remedy and danger. Its presence lingers in your mind the way its scent lingers on your fingertips. Earthy, strange, unforgettable. The moon shifts higher, and your path continues deeper into the medieval world's tangle of remedies and revelations. Somewhere ahead waits another lesson, another substance, another whisper from the shadows. You leave the misty mandrake field behind, stepping back onto the narrow dirt path that winds toward a cluster of cottages glowing faintly in the dark. The night feels heavier now, thick with the quiet weight of secrets you're only just beginning to understand. A faint scent lingers on the breeze, smoky, earthy, and strangely warm. It's the aroma of henbane, a plant feared, revered, and used with a caution so intense it borders on ritual. As you follow the smell, you notice a single cottage with light flickering irregularly through its shutters. Someone inside is tending a fire, no, not just a fire, but a brew. You can sense it before you reach the door. The smoke has a kind of depth, a strange fullness that feels like it presses gently against your thoughts rather than drifting lazily through the air. Curiosity carries you closer. You knock lightly, and the door creaks open a few inches. A middle-aged man peers out, eyes tired but calm. When he sees you aren't a threat, he opens the door wider, beckoning you in with a slow wave. The warmth inside washes over you instantly, carrying with it the unmistakable heated scent of crushed henbane leaves simmering over a low flame. The cottage is dim, lit mostly by the fire and a single beeswax candle on the table. Dried herbs hang everywhere, ribbons of green and brown, shadowed and fragrant. But your attention is drawn to the clay pot on the hearth. Inside, a mixture of herbs bubbles gently, sending up thin curls of smoke that twist lazily before dissolving into the air. He points at it, henbane infusion, and then at his forehead, miming pain, then at his joints. Pain relief, a sedative, something to help him sleep through nights filled with aches earned from years of hard labor. A mainstream historical fact drifts forward in your memory. Henbane, despite its dangerous reputation, was commonly used in medieval Europe as a painkiller and sedative. It was sometimes mixed with beer or wine to produce a mild anesthetic effect. But the plant was unpredictable. One leaf too many and you might fall into hallucinations. 2 leaves too many and you might not wake at all. The man stirs the pot carefully, measuring each movement like someone who has learned through experience, and maybe past mistakes, just how much henbane is too much. He ladles out a small portion into a wooden bowl and lets you smell it. The scent is sharp, earthy, with a faint sweetness buried deep beneath the smoke. You lean in cautiously. Even inhaling too much of the vapor can make your thoughts feel soft around the edges. He steps to a shelf and retrieves a dried henbane leaf, its surface mottled with dark veins. He holds it between his fingers and smiles grimly, a fondness mixed with wariness. He crushes it gently, allowing you to smell the raw leaf. The scent is bitter and slightly rancid, like something that grew too close to the edge of a grave. You pull your head back reflexively, and he laughs, nodding as if he expected that. A quirky tidbit flickers into your mind. Henbane was sometimes planted near the entrances of homes because people believed its smell could repel evil spirits. Ironically, the same smell that was meant to keep spirits away often convinced suspicious neighbors that witches were involved. You look around the cottage, simple, humble, ordinary. Yet you can imagine that a stranger seeing dried henbane hanging from these beams might assume something far more sinister. The man notices your interest and points toward a smaller pot near the back of his hearth. This one holds a thick paste, henbane mixed with animal fat, forming a salve. He rubs a dab on the back of his hand, then on yours. The texture is oily, warm, and carries a faint tingling sensation. He explains through gestures that this ointment is sometimes used on sore muscles and swollen joints. But then he draws a clear line in the air with his finger. Do not use near the face. Do not breathe in while applying. Never give it to children. Potent medicine demands potent respect. He pours you a small cup of warm, non-henbane tea, mint and rose hips, to clear your senses. You drink gratefully, letting the gentle flavors push back the foggy edges of the henbane smoke. He sits on a stool beside you and begins to speak, slowly, carefully, using simple gestures and expression. He tells you that henbane is a plant of two worlds, healing and hallucination. At low doses, it relaxes muscles, eases pain, calms storms of worry. But at higher doses, he taps his temple and widens his eyes. Confusion, visions, a world where shadows breathe and walls shift. People in the village know this. They speak of nights when someone used too much and woke believing they had talked to ghosts or wandered through dreams so vivid they blurred with waking life. Historians still argue whether those experiences were chemical, psychological, or a combination of both. Some scholars claim henbane was responsible for early legends of spirit walking or traveling to other realms. Others insist the plant's effects were overblown, exaggerated by fearful neighbors and imaginative storytellers. But the truth probably lies somewhere in between. A plant that can lull, soothe, and sometimes distort reality just enough to make the impossible seem possible. The man stands and motions for you to follow him outside. He leads you behind the cottage, where a small patch of henbane grows under the moonlight. The leaves look soft, almost inviting, but you know better now. He crouches and touches the soil around them. Rich, dark, tended with care. He explains, again through gestures, that he grows only a small patch each year, harvesting no more than he needs. Henbane demands balance. Too much of it in a household would be tempting, maybe deadly. He plucks one small leaf, not for use, but to show you the signs of proper harvesting. It snaps easily, its fibers clean. A fresh leaf is potent. A dried leaf is safer but unpredictable. You realize then that medieval healers weren't reckless. They were forced to rely on intuition sharpened by necessity. Back inside, the cottage feels even warmer, almost comforting. The man pours himself a small bowl of the henbane brew and drinks slowly, savoring it like someone welcoming a familiar relief. His shoulders drop. His face softens. You watch the transformation with quiet respect. He offers you a pinch of dried mint for your journey and nods toward the door. It's time to let him rest. The henbane will carry him gently into the night. As you step outside, the air feels crisp, clean, almost startling in its clarity after the smoky warmth of the cottage. You inhale deeply, grounding yourself. The village behind you sleeps under a blanket of stars, and somewhere in one small home, a man finally drifts into a pain-free slumber. You continue your path forward, carrying with you the knowledge that medieval comfort was built not just on soft herbs and sweet drinks, but on potent plants like henbane, dangerous, powerful, and handled with both fear and familiarity. The night darkens around you as you walk deeper into the mysteries waiting ahead. You leave the warmth of the henbane cottage behind, stepping into a night that seems deeper, darker, almost thicker than before, as though every step forward pulls you into a different layer of medieval life. The path narrows again, turning from packed dirt into something softer, muffled by fallen leaves and damp moss. Up ahead, a low hill rises like a shadow wearing a shawl of fog. The silence here is dense, almost watchful, broken only by the faint hoot of an owl perched somewhere in the branches above. But then you hear something else, soft chanting. Not words exactly, more like rhythmic breaths blending with the wind. You follow the sound, curiosity tugging at your senses, until you reach a small clearing lit by a single fire. The flames crackle slowly, as if reluctant to break the quiet. Around the fire sit three figures, hooded, focused, their faces warmed by the glow. At first, you think this must be some kind of religious gathering, but then you smell it. The unmistakable aroma of warming herbs, sharp, floral, earthy, and slightly bitter. Not substances used for healing bruised joints or soothing sore throats. No, these herbs are meant for something else entirely. Something that dances on the line between medicine, ritual, and fear. Henbane again, but mixed now with datura, belladonna, and other plants you recognize from stories whispered like warnings. And then you see the bowl, an earthen vessel filled with a thick, glossy ointment that glows faintly in the firelight. The mixture is dark, with a sheen almost like oil. One of the hooded figures dips a wooden spatula into it and spreads a thin layer onto her forearm. She closes her eyes. Her breathing slows. The others follow suit. This is the infamous flying ointment. A mainstream historical fact drifts through your mind. Certain medieval texts describe salves made from belladonna, henbane, mandrake, and fat, used topically to relieve pain or induce trance-like states. Many scholars believe these mixtures, absorbed through the skin, caused vivid hallucinations, experiences that may have evolved into folklore about witches soaring through the night. You watch as the first woman leans back, her head tilting upward, her expression softening. She raises her hands slightly, as if feeling currents of air that no one else can sense. It's quiet, peaceful even. Not the wild, cackling chaos the witch hunters later imagined, but something far more human. A momentary escape from aching bodies, hard work, and a life with few comforts. The oldest figure notices you watching and motions for you to come closer. Not threateningly, but with a gentle sort of amusement, as though observing a traveler who stumbled into the wrong campfire story. She shows you the bowl but shakes her head firmly. This is not something to try lightly. She points to her temple, then makes a spiraling gesture, suggesting how the ointment twists the mind, opening doors you may not be ready to walk through. A quirky tidbit surfaces. Some medieval recipes recommended applying flying ointments not to the skin, but to objects like brooms or staves, so that the person could hold or straddle the object while the hallucinations took effect. The sensation of floating, soaring, or flying was said to feel astonishingly real, the mind convinced it had left the earthly body behind. You imagine it now. A woman gripping a broom smeared with potent herbs, feeling her body lighten, her senses drift outward, the ground falling away beneath her feet. Not literally, but powerfully enough that the memory of it becomes indistinguishable from flight. Stories birthed from human longing, pain relief, and potent plants. One of the younger women reaches into a basket and pulls out a bundle of dried herbs tied with red string, wormwood, mugwort, lavender, and a few strands of something darker. She tosses it onto the fire, and the smoke thickens instantly, turning the air velvety, dreamlike. You inhale cautiously. The scent is heavy but not unpleasant, like damp wood and crushed flowers. Wormwood, you recall, was used in rituals, sleep-inducing teas, and later in absinthe. Here, it's simply part of the atmosphere, an anchor for whatever journey the ointment takes them on. The oldest woman takes a seat beside you. She pulls her hood down, revealing a face lined with age but softened by kindness. She traces shapes in the air, telling you a story without words. Villagers once came to people like her for help sleeping, for easing grief, for visions to guide them through difficult decisions. These ointments were part medicine, part ritual, part escape. But then fear grew, accusations spread, and something once used calmly and quietly became tied to the idea of witchcraft. Historians still argue whether women like these were healers, mystics, or simply misunderstood. Some insist they were experimenting with early pharmacology, testing plants, observing effects, adjusting mixtures. Others say they were performing spiritual practices older than Christianity, rooted in folk traditions. And some suggest both are true at once. The woman taps your chest lightly, then your head, medicine and meaning, body and mind. Both mattered. A sudden spark pops from the fire, sending embers swirling upward. One of the hooded women lifts her arms toward them, eyes shining as though she sees patterns in the sparks. Maybe she does. Maybe the ointment has already drifted through her senses, reshaping the world into something fluid and dreamlike. You take a step back, not out of fear but respect. These rituals aren't theatrical. They're deeply personal. A tool for easing burdens, exploring inner landscapes, or seeking answers when reality feels too rigid. The air thickens again as another bundle of herbs burns. The smoke swirls around you, soft, enveloping. You blink slowly, the scene beginning to feel both close and distant at once. The women's movements blur slightly, graceful, unhurried. Their breaths fall into a shared rhythm. It's not sinister. It's intimate, a communal drifting into another mental space. The oldest woman extinguishes the fire gradually, burying the flames under a mound of earth. The clearing dims, shadows reclaiming the ground. The ritual is ending. One by one, the women rise, steady but softened, as though waking from a vivid dream. Before leaving, the elder hands you a small pouch containing dried mugwort. She closes your fingers around it, pressing gently, a gesture of trust or perhaps protection. Mugwort for dreams, for intuition, for clarity in the places where the waking world blurs. As the women disappear into the forest, the clearing grows silent again. The night feels different now, charged with the strange, lingering hum of plant-born visions. You breathe in the cool air and feel the remnants of smoke swirl faintly through your senses. Then, slowly, you step back onto the path, carrying with you the knowledge that stories of witches and flying weren't born from malice or madness, but from the complex dance between suffering relief and the potent plants that shaped medieval nights. You leave the forest clearing behind, stepping carefully across roots and soft moss until the path widens again, smoothing into a well-worn trail. The night has cooled, the mist thinning, making each breath feel crisp in your chest. Ahead, you see a faint glimmer of metal reflecting moonlight. As you approach, the glimmer resolves into something familiar yet distinctly medieval. A leather satchel resting atop a low stone wall. Its owner appears moments later, a traveling physician making his slow way along the night road. He is older, wrapped in a thick cloak, with a lantern hanging from one hand and a staff in the other. When he sees you, he doesn't startle. Instead, he lifts his lantern slightly, illuminating his face in warm, flickering amber. He nods in quiet acknowledgement, a silent invitation to join him. You sit together on the stone wall, and he places the satchel between you with the care of someone who carries both remedies and risks in equal measure. He unlatches its buckled flap, revealing the tidy compartments inside. Jars, cloth-wrapped bundles, small vials, folded papers, little wooden boxes tied with twine. This isn't just a bag. It's a traveling pharmacy, a portable world of medicines meant to treat fever, fear, wounds, dreams, and the strange afflictions medieval people blamed on everything from spirits to unbalanced humors. He pulls out the first item, a tin box filled with dried meadowsweet flowers. Their scent is faintly sweet, grassy, and soothing. When he crushes a few petals between his fingers, you recognize the familiar aroma, medieval aspirin. A mainstream historical fact sparks in your mind. Meadowsweet contains salicylates, similar to the active ingredient in modern aspirin. Monks and physicians used it for fevers, headaches, and bodily aches. The physician gestures toward his temples and nods. For pain, for heat, for colds. You smile at the continuity across centuries. Humans have always needed something to dull the edge of discomfort. Next, he removes a small bottle filled with liquid the color of pale honey. He uncorks it just enough for you to catch a whiff, sharp, herbaceous, and slightly sweet. Rosemary wine tincture. He mimes rubbing his joints, then making a circular motion around his heart. For circulation, for comfort. Today we'd call it a stimulant or tonic. Back then, it was simply strengthening. He places the bottle beside you and reaches for a different container. A wooden box carved with intricate patterns. When he opens it, the scent hits you immediately. Pungent, earthy, slightly musky. Powdered valerian root. Its unmistakable aroma lingering even in a closed box. He wiggles his hand like a falling leaf. Sleep, relaxation. But then he holds up a warning finger. Too much leads to dizziness. Too much leads to confusion. You nod, remembering the valerian tea simmering earlier in the night. He pulls out another bundle, this one tightly wrapped and tied with 3 knots. He opens it to reveal crushed orris root, pale and powdery. The scent is faintly floral, almost violet-like. He taps his chest lightly, used to freshen breath or soothe stomach ailments. But he then waves his hand back and forth as if uncertain. Historians still argue whether medieval physicians overestimated orris's healing power or used it chiefly for its pleasant scent in otherwise unpleasant mixtures. You laugh quietly. Even medieval doctors needed their patients to actually drink the stuff. The physician's next item is unexpected. A long, slender metal tool with a curved end and a wooden grip. Not for surgery, though he certainly has those tools as well, but for measuring powder. He uses the curved spoon to scoop something from a small sack. When he lifts it toward the lantern, you see its crushed fennel seed mixed with finely ground parsley root. He mimes rubbing his eyes and then taking a deep breath, an alertness blend. For travelers who must stay awake. For night watches. For messengers delivering urgent news. A medieval pick-me-up, without the convenience of a coffee shop. Then he pulls from the satchel a thin vial filled with what appears to be red dust. He brushes a little onto the back of your hand. It's soft as silk, faintly sweet-smelling. Dragon's blood resin. Not from dragons, of course, but from the sap of a certain tree. Used for wound care, incense, or mixing into salves. One quirky tidbit slides perfectly into place. Some medieval healers believed dragon's blood could ward off misfortune or strengthen magical treatments. Whether used for medicine or superstition, its vivid color made it unforgettable. The physician closes the vial and takes out a parchment bundle tied with string. When he opens it, a strong minty aroma fills the air. Pennyroyal, sharp and cooling. He mimes rubbing his stomach and then shivers dramatically. Pennyroyal tea, when carefully prepared, relieved nausea and indigestion. But he holds up a strict warning gesture. Dangerous if used too strongly, especially for pregnant women. You understand the gravity of his caution immediately. From another pocket he produces camphor, a small crystalline block with a powerful scent even from a distance. He lifts it to your nose, and the sharpness almost jolts your senses awake. He circles a hand around his head, meant to clear foggy thoughts. Some medieval physicians believed camphor cooled overheated humors. Others used it as a sensory stimulant to counteract fatigue or emotional heaviness. The satchel grows more bewildering the deeper you explore. He reveals dried juniper berries, a folded sachet of crushed mint, packets of dried orange peel, a vial of infused oil for treating chest congestion, even a tiny jar containing powdered malachite, a mineral sometimes used in amulets for protection or ground, very carefully, into salves. You can't help but smile at the thought. Medieval medicine wasn't just plants. It was a constellation of substances, beliefs, hopes, and risks. Then the physician shows you one more tool. A small glass vial, tightly sealed, containing a viscous liquid swirling amber and gold. He turns it in the light and it gleams. Apobalsam, he indicates, rare, precious, used for calming severe pain. Only nobles or wealthy patrons could afford it. But he carries a tiny amount anyway in case of dire need. You sense the weight of responsibility in his posture. Traveling physicians walked miles between villages, carrying the burden of being the closest thing people had to modern medicine. They stitched wounds, eased childbirth pains, soothed the dying, and helped the living stay alive through cold winters and fevers that roared through households like storms. He closes his satchel carefully, as though sealing a fragile world back into hiding. Then he stands, lowering his lantern and preparing to move on. Before he leaves, he hands you something small. A folded piece of cloth containing a sprig of meadowsweet and a piece of dried orange peel. A simple gift, a miniature version of his entire craft. You watch him disappear into the night, the light of his lantern bobbing like a little firefly carried by purpose. As you walk on, the weight of what you witness settles around you. In a world without hospitals, antibiotics, or painkillers as we know them, a traveling physician's satchel was both lifeline and lore, a delicate balance between knowledge, hope, and the ever-present dangers hiding inside the plants and powders of medieval life. The night path stretches ahead, and you continue your journey through the hidden corners of the Middle Ages, where remedies and risks often share the same bottle. You continue down the moonlit road, the scent of orange peel and meadowsweet still lingering faintly on your fingers. The night seems to shift around you, softening as distant sounds begin to replace the silence. Murmured laughter, the low thrum of voices, the occasional thump of a wooden mug meeting a table. Ahead, warm light spills from crooked windows, shimmering across the dirt like gold dust. You know this glow instantly. It belongs to the tavern, the heart of medieval nightlife, the place where exhaustion melts, stories swell, and people let reality loosen its grip just a little. As you push open the heavy wooden door, a gust of warm, spiced air greets you. Ale, roasted onions, smoke, sweat, and something botanical you can't quite place at first. The room is alive with gentle chaos. Villagers crowd around rough-hewn tables, cloaks slung over benches, mugs raised in greeting or argument. A dog naps under a table, twitching as though chasing rabbits in its dreams. A bard plucks at a lute in the corner, his fingers moving lazily, not performing for glory but simply filling the space with something melodic. You step further inside, letting the warmth soak into your chilled skin. The tavern keeper nods, handing you a wooden mug without needing to ask what you want. You take a sip. The ale is mild, earthy, slightly cloudy, with a sweetness that comes from honey rather than refined sugar. But there's something else in it, something herbal. You swirl it and sniff. Yarrow and sweet gale, a common blend added to beer before hops became widespread. A mainstream historical fact flickers into your thoughts. Before hops dominated brewing, medieval Alesh often relied on grut, mixtures of herbs that flavored the drink and sometimes carried mild psychoactive or sedative effects. Yarrow could heighten sensations. Sweet gale added warmth and a faint buzzing clarity. There was no strict separation between drink and medicine. Everything blended. You take another sip, and a warmth spreads behind your eyes. Not dizzying but pleasantly fuzzy. Enough to soften the edges of the day. At the table beside you, a man with a thick beard and cheerful eyes taps your mug approvingly. He lifts his own, all foam and froth, and gestures for you to join his group. Their table is cluttered with mugs, crumbs, and what looks like a small pile of dried herbs. You sit, and he introduces them with proud flourish. A mason, a shepherd, a midwife, a cooper. Ordinary people sharing a moment of ease. The shepherd nudges the pile of herbs toward you. It smells faintly like chamomile but more pungent. He grins and sprinkles a pinch into his ale. The others do the same. The midwife, sharp-eyed and calm, motions for you to taste hers instead of overloading yours. You sip cautiously. The drink is sweeter now, deeper, with an edge of something soft and dreamy. She leans closer, explaining through gestures that the herb is woodruff, a plant used in small amounts to add flavor and induce calm. Too much could make your thoughts swim, she warns, drawing wavy lines in the air. Historians still argue whether woodruff's effects were noticeable or psychological. But sitting here, surrounded by laughter and candle smoke, you feel its warm embrace. The cooper laughs at a joke you didn't hear and slaps the table so hard his mug jumps. He insists on buying the next round. When the tavern keeper arrives with the drinks, you notice one mug is a deep reddish brown. The mason pushes it toward you proudly. Spiced mead, he says, or rather mimes, since his words slur into a warm blur. You take a careful sip. The drink is thick, sweet, warming, infused with cinnamon and cloves. Tastes like holiday nights wrapped in fur blankets. When your shoulders relax a little too much, the midwife points to a bowl at the center of the table. Roasted barley mixed with fennel and mint. She pops some into her mouth and gestures for you to do the same. You laugh softly at the medieval version of sobering snacks. It works, too, the warm herbs balancing the sweet mead. At another table, the bard has shifted into a livelier tune. His fingers dance across the strings as he sings about a knight who fell in love with a miller's daughter and drank so much herb-laced ale that he saw her turning into a swan. The tavern erupts in laughter. A quirky tidbit stirs in your memory. Stories of shape-shifting at night weren't always metaphor. They sometimes stemmed from mild hallucinations brought on by herbal Alesh. A group of sailors near the back raise their mugs high, singing an off-key chorus. One pulls from his pocket a small pouch and sprinkles something into his drink. You catch the scent as you walk past: juniper, crushed fresh. A stimulant, a cleanser of the senses, favored by travelers to stay alert and stave off seasickness. The sailor lifts his mug to you and winks, proud of his little ritual. You settle into a corner bench, sipping your ale, feeling the tavern pulse with its own slow heartbeat. Candles gutter occasionally, sending shadows leaping across beams. Every conversation blends into a gentle hum, comforting, hypnotic. You observe a young couple whispering over their drinks. The woman sprinkles a tiny pinch of dried safflower into hers, gesturing toward her temples. Mood-lifting, she implies, lightening the heart, a makeshift antidepressant in a world without such language. A man nearby leans back too far and nearly tumbles off his bench. His friends catch him, roaring with laughter. They claim he had a mug flavored with too much yarrow. He protests, insisting the ale was simply overenthusiastic tonight. You hide a smile. A serving boy passes your table carrying a tray of small clay cups filled with something thick and almost black. He offers one to you for a single coin. You take it. The drink smells smoky, sweet, and slightly sour. The boy mimes a sleeping gesture. It's a nightcap made from warm ale mixed with honey, nutmeg, and a whisper of poppy seed. Just enough to soften the mind without sending anyone spinning into dreams they can't escape. You sip it slowly. The flavor is comforting, grounded. The aftertaste lingers like a lullaby. The tavern quiets gradually as the night deepens. One by one, chairs scrape, cloaks are gathered, mugs emptied. The shepherd gives you a friendly clap on the shoulder before leaving, and the midwife slips you a sprig of mint for clarity before sleep, she says with a wink. The bard strums one final chord, nods to the last few listeners, and begins packing his worn lute. The tavern keeper extinguishes the lanterns one by one, leaving only the hearth. Its glow flickers warmly across the now empty room. You step outside into the cool air, your head pleasantly light but clear. The door creaks shut behind you as the keeper latches it for the night. Standing beneath the stars, you inhale deeply. The scents of ale, herbs, smoke, and laughter swirl together in your memory. Medieval taverns weren't places to flee reality. They were places where reality was softened, warmed, and shared, a communal easing of the day's burdens. You walk on, feeling the night settle around you like a soft cloak, ready to lead you into whatever mysteries wait just beyond the next bend. You leave the tavern's warm afterglow behind, stepping once more into the hush of midnight. The road stretches ahead in a pale ribbon of moonlight, bordered by dark hedgerows and soft murmurs of the sleeping countryside. Your head is clear again, the mingled herbs and alesh fading into a gentle memory. But the night still carries traces of stories. Stories whispered by travelers, wanderers, and pilgrims who spent their lives chasing cures, blessings, and strange concoctions that promised relief from both pain and uncertainty. As you walk, the path widens and grows smoother, worn down by countless footsteps. You notice small piles of stones stacked neatly along the roadside, a sign of travelers marking safe passage. Further along, you spot a wooden post carved with a scallop shell, the unmistakable symbol of pilgrimage in the medieval world. And then you see them, a small group of pilgrims, cloaked and hooded, resting by a low fire. They wave you over with tired smiles. Pilgrims are rarely suspicious. Hardship binds them together. You sit near their fire, feeling its warmth seep gradually into your fingers. Their faces glow in the flickering light, worn but hopeful. You notice at once the small leather pouches each carries. Healing kits of sorts, filled with herbs and powders meant to keep them alive through hundreds of miles of rough terrain. One of the pilgrims, an older man with silver hair and soft eyes, opens his pouch. Inside are bundles of sage, rosemary, thyme, and lavender, wrapped carefully in thin cloth. He hands you the lavender, motioning for you to inhale. Its scent is so soothing you feel your shoulders drop without effort. Lavender, he explains through gestures, keeps nightmares away and helps travelers sleep even on cold ground. A mainstream historical fact floats into your mind. Many medieval pilgrims believed certain herbs had divine protection woven into them, often blessed by priests before their journey. Sage was burned in incense rituals. Rosemary symbolized remembrance. Lavender warded off the wandering spirits believed to trouble the vulnerable at night. You can imagine weary travelers clutching these herbs like talismans, hoping their sleep wouldn't be disturbed by cold, fear, or dreams that felt too real. Another pilgrim, a younger woman with determined eyes, opens her own pouch to show you something more unusual. Dried berries, shriveled and dark. She gestures to your stomach and makes a rolling motion. Bilberries, known to ease digestion on long walks. She drops a few into her palm and mimes chewing. You try one. It tastes tart and earthy, leaving a faint sweetness on your tongue. She then pulls out a small corked vial filled with liquid so dark it looks like ink. She uncorks it slightly and wafts it toward you. The smell is thick, sweet, almost woody. You recognize it from earlier in the night, store-bought pitch wine, a mix of resin and fermented grape. Pilgrims used it as both disinfectant and tonic. It soothed throats, healed minor wounds, and lifted spirits when exhaustion made the road feel endless. The third pilgrim, lean, sunburned, wearing a scallop shell badge, pulls out something stranger, a sticky brown ball wrapped in linen. He unwraps it with the reverence of someone handling precious treasure. Inside is Pilgrim's electuary, a mix of honey, spices, ground herbs, and sometimes even powdered bark. He breaks off a small piece and hands it to you. It tastes like spiced earth, warming, bitter, but strangely pleasant. He taps his chest. Strength, endurance. You understand instantly. On long journeys, electuaries were essential medieval energy bars infused with mood-lifting herbs. You laugh softly at the comparison, and the pilgrim chuckles too, even if he doesn't catch your exact thought. A quirky tidbit comes to mind. Some pilgrim communities believed that mixing the dust of holy sites with honey and herbs created potent remedies capable of warding off illness. Many brought small vials of such mixtures home as souvenirs, convinced they held spiritual and medicinal power. You wonder how many dusty vials sat forgotten in medieval cupboards, their contents both sacred and deeply questionable. As the fire crackles lower, the older pilgrim offers you a sip from a larger clay bottle. The drink inside is warm and spicy, flavored with caraway and fennel, a traveler's brew meant to ease fatigue and calm the mind after long days of walking. He mimes rubbing his calves, then sighs dramatically. You understand the message. The road is long, and comfort is precious. The group grows more lively as they share their stories. One tells you about a healer in a distant village who offered him a strange liquid said to give visions of saints. When he drank it, he saw only swirling lights and heard the faint hum of bees, nothing heavenly. He shrugs. Maybe the saints were busy, or maybe the liquid was just infused with too much mugwort. Historians still argue whether such visionary mixtures were spiritual tools or herbal mishaps with unexpected side effects. Listening to the pilgrims describe them with a mixture of awe and amusement, you suspect the truth lies somewhere between devotion and chemistry. Another pilgrim describes a monastery where travelers received bowls of hot broth infused with vervain, believed to purify the spirit. The broth tasted medicinal, he admits, but after drinking it he slept so soundly he nearly missed morning prayers. You smile. Medieval life rarely offered soft beds. Good sleep was miracle enough. The younger woman unwraps a final item, a tiny leather bottle filled with something pale and creamy. She dabs a bit on her wrist and hands it to you. It smells floral, almost perfume-like. She taps her forehead with 2 fingers. Clarity. She used it to stay alert when crossing dangerous paths. You touch it lightly. Rose oil, diluted in wax. Not a stimulant in the modern sense, but comforting enough to sharpen awareness when exhaustion threatened to blur her vision. The pilgrims begin packing their belongings as the fire burns down to soft embers. Before they stand, the older pilgrim hands you a small cloth bundle. You open it to find sage, dried neatly and tied with twine. He presses his hand to his heart, then extends it to you. A gift, a blessing, a reminder that even strangers share their strength when the road is long. You tie the bundle to your belt beside the pouch of mandrake leaf you received earlier. Your journey feels less solitary with each relic you collect, symbols of trust from the people who drift through these medieval nights just trying to hold their world together. As the pilgrims depart, their lanterns bobbing gently in the dark, you stand on the quiet road again, feeling the cool breeze brush against your cheeks. Their footsteps fade into the distance, replaced by the soft rustling of trees and the steady hum of insects. You continue walking, carrying their herbs, their stories, and their strange little cures with you. Ahead, the road stretches on, dark, mysterious, lined with remedies both hopeful and dangerous. Each step reminds you that medieval travelers sought more than destinations. They sought healing, meaning, and a way to navigate a world where every hardship demanded its own potion, prayer, or whispered charm. You breathe deeply, letting the scents of sage and fennel linger in your lungs, and move onward into the night. You walk deeper into the night, the pilgrim's lantern lights fading behind you until the road becomes nothing but a silver thread under the moon. The world grows quieter, softer, as though holding its breath in anticipation. Ahead, the terrain shifts, rockier, steeper, with patches of bare earth that look scorched. The faint smell of heated metal and smoke drifts toward you, strangely out of place in the cool air. You follow it, curiosity sharpening your steps, until you reach a low stone building tucked into a hillside. Its narrow windows glow with flickering light, not the warm flicker of hearth fire, but something sharper, almost liquid in intensity. You hear faint clinks of metal, the bubbling of unknown substances, and a low hum that makes the hairs on your arms lift. You've arrived at one of the most mysterious corners of the medieval world, an alchemy workshop. The door stands slightly ajar. You push it open gently, and the scene inside unfolds like a secret the night has been waiting to reveal. A single figure moves through the dim room, a thin, bearded alchemist wearing a soot-stained robe, his hair tied back with a cord. He glances up when you enter, not startled but quietly amused. Visitors at this hour are rare, but not forbidden. He gestures you forward with ink-smudged fingers. The workshop is alive with flickers, glimmers, and shadows. Rows of glass vessels, flasks, alembics, retorts, sit on wooden shelves, catching firelight and turning it into distorted reflections. On the table nearest you rests a glowing red coal beneath a small copper bowl. As you watch, the alchemist reaches for a jar of powdered herbs and pinches a small amount into the bowl. The mixture smolders, releasing a scent that's earthy, metallic, and faintly sweet. He motions for you to smell the smoke cautiously. You lean in, inhale gently, and feel a sudden shimmer behind your eyes, like a thought forming slightly too fast. The alchemist smiles knowingly. Myrhh and wormwood, he indicates, used to calm the mind while sharpening focus. Not exactly a stimulant, not exactly a sedative, something stranger, balancing both states at once. A mainstream historical fact surfaces. Alchemists weren't only chasing gold or immortality. Many experimented with plants, minerals, and fumes to explore how substances affected perception, clarity, and even spiritual experience. Some mixtures were precursors to chemical anesthetics. Others were mild hallucination-inducing concoctions, used not for recreation but for insight or what they hoped was insight. The alchemist guides you to another table where a glass vessel sits atop a heated sand bath. Inside, a golden liquid bubbles slowly. He uncorks a jar filled with a resin that glows amber in the firelight. Frankincense. He drops a small piece into the vessel, and the scent intensifies, warm, rich, almost holy. Many medieval thinkers believed frankincense could elevate the mind, making it easier to grasp divine or philosophical truths. He taps his temple with a wink. Clarity, the gesture seems to say, or something pretending to be clarity. Beside the vessel sits a folded parchment covered in symbols, circles, and little drawings of plants. The alchemist unfurls it, tracing one symbol with his finger, an eye drawn inside a starburst. He then points to a jar of crushed henbane sitting carefully on a high shelf. He lifts it but does not open it. He circles his hand in the air and shakes his head. Dangerous, but sometimes used for visionary experiments. Historians still argue whether the alchemist's so-called visions were spiritual pursuits, chemical reactions, or simply the side effects of potent hallucinogens inhaled after hours of working in poorly ventilated rooms. You notice a small metal spoon resting beside a mortar filled with crushed blue-green powder. He taps it and mimics a cough. Copper salts, toxic in large amounts, but occasionally used in minuscule quantities for experiments involving color, smoke, or flame. You imagine a long night in this confined room, the fumes blurring edges, turning ordinary lights into strange halos. The alchemist opens a leather-bound book, its pages so worn they feel soft as cloth. Inside are notes written in hurried Latin, diagrams of stills and furnaces, lists of plants and minerals. He flips to a page with a recipe involving mandrake, wine, saffron, and an unidentified mineral. He gestures to you, miming someone sinking into deep sleep, a sedative concoction. Then he mimes someone dreaming vividly, hands waving as though grasping unseen shapes, a visionary tonic. He closes the book and gives you a small, sheepish shrug, as if to say, "Impact varies." You smile. Alchemy was part science, part mysticism, part very risky trial and error. You wander further into the room. A large stone furnace dominates one corner, glowing with embers. Above it hangs a copper cauldron where something thick and dark simmers. He lifts the lid briefly, revealing a mixture of herbs floating in a tar-like broth. He gestures to your nose again. You smell juniper, mugwort, and something mineral, perhaps powdered iron, used symbolically in rituals for strength and grounding. He places his hand on his heart, then opens his palm like a blooming flower. The potion is meant to steady emotions and open the mind. Whether it works is another question. A quirky tidbit flutters into your mind. Some alchemists believed fumes rising from heated mixtures carried the spirit of the substance, and inhaling them allowed knowledge to pass directly into the body. Whether this produced wisdom or mild poisoning varied widely. The alchemist leads you to a small wooden chest with iron hinges. When he opens it, you see a collection of crystals, stones, and powders that shimmer softly, even in dim light. He hands you a vial of crushed lapis lazuli, its deep blue flecked with gold. He mimes someone thinking, then expanding their hands outward. Expanded imagination, creativity, insight. You've read that some medieval artists used lapis lazuli to enhance the color of manuscripts. But here, in the alchemist's world, it becomes a tool for transforming the mind. He then hands you a lighter, chalky powder, gypsum ground fine. He taps his chest and his forehead again. Calming, centering. It's strange to think something now used for plaster once sat in alchemists' cabinets as a stabilizing agent for emotional or mental experiments. As he continues revealing his tools, he reaches for a jar containing something that looks like metallic dust. Shiny, reflective. Ground mica. He sprinkles a little on a coal, and the particles flare like tiny stars. He smiles at your reaction and points upward, suggesting celestial visions or imagined constellations. You laugh softly. Medieval people had a gift for weaving wonder into ordinary materials. Finally, he returns to the center of the room, placing both hands flat on the table. He nods to you as though asking what you think of his world, a question with no simple answer. It's a place where remedies, hallucinations, experiments, and dreams intermingle freely. A place where the line between medicine and mysticism blurs into smoke. He pours a tiny amount of frankincense-infused liquid into a small wooden cup and offers it to you. You smell it cautiously and accept only a sip. Warm, bright, comforting, like the distilled essence of candlelight. Just enough to relax your mind without pushing you into visions. As you stand to leave, the alchemist hands you a small piece of parchment folded into a square. Inside is a pinch of powdered myrrh, wrapped like treasure, a token of the night, a reminder of a world where transformation, real or imagined, hung always within reach. Stepping out into the cold air, the scent of heated resins clings to your clothes. Above you, the stars seem brighter, sharper, almost humming, as though the workshop's energy has followed you outside. You continue along the path, carrying a little alchemy with you into the dark. You leave the alchemist's workshop behind, stepping back into the cool night where the stars glitter with a clarity that feels almost unreal after the smoky, flickering haze inside. The path ahead widens again, the earth growing smoother beneath your feet. You notice how the countryside begins to change. Less wild, more groomed. Lantern posts line the road in regular intervals. Their glow steady and deliberate rather than haphazard like the tavern lights or pilgrim fires. You're entering the outskirts of royal influence, where wealth shapes the landscape and the night feels curated rather than organic. The breeze carries hints of perfume, warm bread, and a faint trace of imported spices. Soon the path gives way to a wide stone bridge arched over a calm moat, and beyond it rises a castle lit in warm, golden washes, windows glowing like watchful eyes across the darkness. A guard nods as you pass through the gate, apparently satisfied that you pose no threat. You follow the echoing corridor into a grand hall where nobles gather even at this late hour. They stand in small clusters, cloaks draped over embroidered tunics, their fingers wrapped around goblets, their conversations low and thoughtful. This is not a wild party. It's something quieter, more exclusive. A gathering where rare substances and exotic curiosities are exchanged like secret currency. You're swept gently into their world as a steward hands you a small cup of something warm and amber-colored. The scent hits you first, sweet, sharp, and unmistakably foreign. Saffron wine, a luxury reserved for the elite. You take a careful sip, and flavors blossom across your tongue. Floral, earthy, with a brightness that lingers. Saffron was treasured in medieval courts not just for its taste but for its supposed benefits. Lifting moods, invigorating the spirit, or gently easing melancholy. A mainstream historical fact stirs in your mind. Saffron was so expensive in the Middle Ages that entire laws regulated its sale. Counterfeiters faced brutal punishment. Yet here it flows freely, bright as treasure, into delicate glass cups. A noble woman in a silver gown approaches, intrigued by your expression. With a flourish, she reveals a small pouch tied with golden thread. Inside are thin strips of something pale, almost translucent. She lets you smell them, sweet and slightly musky. Galangal root, brought from distant lands, used as both spice and stimulant. She taps her chest and lifts her chin. Confidence, vitality. You imagine nobles sneaking slivers of galangal during long negotiations or late-night dances. From across the room, another noble calls you over eagerly. His table is covered with curiosities. Bowls of dried fruits, tiny crystal vials, carved wooden boxes. With boyish excitement, he opens a box containing a powder so fine it glows faintly in the candlelight. He dips a tiny golden spoon into it and offers you a whiff. The scent is herbal, cooling, almost mint-adjacent. Spikenard, prized for its calming effects. He pats his heart and exhales dramatically. It soothes anxiety, he implies, and invites sleep without the harsh crash of stronger herbs. You notice another object on his table, a small greenish lump wrapped in silk. He unwraps it carefully, revealing dried leaves folded over themselves repeatedly. He pinches the top layer and offers the tiniest bit to you. The smell is earthy, deep, almost smoky. Beetle leaf brought through extensive trade routes. He mimics chewing, then lifts his brows as if describing alertness, clarity, and a touch of euphoria. You've read that while beetle chewing never took strong root in medieval Europe, it reached some courts through merchants who carried strange delights from faraway shores. As you wander the hall, servants move gracefully with trays of drinks, golden liqueurs, herbal infusions, and warm honeyed wines infused with cardamom or cinnamon. Rare spices so valuable they could be used to pay rent. You accept a cup of cinnamon-infused wine and let its heat sink deep into your chest. A nobleman with a scholar's posture beckons you toward a quieter alcove near a tall window. There, on a velvet-lined table, rests a display of exotic powders and substances that look almost like stolen stars under candlelight. He shows you a vial filled with crushed ambergris, a waxy substance from Wales, prized for perfumes and believed to have warming, invigorating properties. He sprinkles the smallest amount onto a piece of cloth and waves it toward you. The scent is subtly sweet, strangely oceanic. You close your eyes for a moment, surprised by how comforting it feels. He then presents a jar containing a dark, sticky resin that glows when held to the light. Mastic, he explains with elaborate gestures. A chewing resin used to freshen breath, calm nerves, and even help digestion after royal feasts. He pops a small piece into his mouth and chews contentedly, its piney scent filling the air. Another noble steps forward with something far stranger. A geometric crystal, the size of a plum, pale green with shimmering facets. He places it in your hand gently. It's smooth and cold, humming faintly with mystery. Beryl, believed to sharpen memory and ward off fatigue when worn or held. Historians still argue whether the stone's reputation was based on real effects or simply elite imagination. You wonder as you hold it. There is a certain calmness that settles in your chest, but perhaps that's just the atmosphere. As the crystal is returned, a servant arrives with a wooden tray filled with tiny cups of a thick, milky drink. You accept one and taste it. The flavor is sweet, floral, with a strange undercurrent of spice. The noble beside you explains through gestures that it contains nutmeg, a substance so rare it could cost more than gold. In moderate amounts, it warms the body and lifts the mood. But he wags his finger warningly. Too much induces dizziness, nausea, even hallucinations. You recall reading of medieval accounts where overly generous nutmeg doses sent people drifting into strange dream states. The room's wealthy occupants nod knowingly. Even luxury comes with limits. A kindly-looking older woman approaches with a silver box shaped like a tiny chest. Inside are small, round pellets coated in sugar. She places one in your hand and motions for you to sniff it. The scent is bright, tangy, almost citrus-like. Candied ginger used to calm the stomach and invigorate the senses. She pops one into her own mouth and laughs, tapping her foot as if demonstrating its energizing effects. From the corner, a quiet, noble scholar retrieves a scroll from his sleeve. He unrolls it to show careful drawings of flowers and roots. He points to one, a delicate, pale flower with an elongated bulb. Orchis root, ground into a flour-like powder called salep, used to make warm drinks reputed to strengthen the body. He mimes flexing his muscles, then laughs at his own overdramatic gesture. The hall continues to buzz with soft conversation, clinking glasses, and the subtle exchange of substances that represent status as much as remedy. You watch as nobles trade tiny pouches, one offering saffron threads in exchange for a vial of rare incense resin. Another swaps a piece of coral for a packet of cardamom. Historians still argue whether the nobility actually felt the effects these substances promised or if their enjoyment was more symbolic, a ritual of indulgence and power. Standing here, you suspect it was both. The flavors, scents, and sensations are real enough, and so is the prestige of possessing something rare, potent, or rumored to influence the body and mind. As the night deepens, musicians begin a soft, winding melody. Nobles drift toward the center of the hall, swaying gently in slow, rhythmic movements. Some drink spiced wine, others inhale smoke from censers burning exotic resins, their eyes half closed as if drifting somewhere between wakefulness and dream. You step back, observing the room as a whole, the layers of fragrance, the quiet hum of pleasure, the soft blurring of reality encouraged by these rare, costly substances that only the wealthy could access. And as you leave the hall through a side door, the night greets you again, cool and open. Behind you, the castle continues glowing softly, like a lantern filled with secrets. You walk onward into the dark, carrying the lingering taste of saffron wine and the echo of luxurious remedies whispered among those privileged enough to use them. You leave the castle's golden glow behind, following a narrow stone path that leads back into the untamed quiet of the countryside. The night feels different now, cooler, calmer, as though the world has inhaled deeply and settled into itself. The influences of the noble's rare substances still hum faintly in your senses. Saffron warmth, spikenard softness, the distant sweetness of candied ginger. But out here, under the open sky, those luxuries dissolve into something simpler, older, more elemental. Grass whispers at your ankles as you walk. The moon, now high, casts silver light that turns every shadow into softened charcoal. You hear the faint trickle of a stream and follow it, letting instinct guide you through a small wooded grove. The path curves again and opens into a quiet clearing, a natural hollow surrounded by oak, ash, and willow trees whose branches sway gently as if ushering you in. Here, at the threshold of night's deepest hour, people once turned to the substances that lived in the liminal space between waking and dreaming. Nothing exotic, nothing royal, just herbs, smoke, warmth, and the fragile human desire to drift safely into sleep. You kneel in the clearing, feeling the soft moss yield beneath your weight, cushioning your hands like a welcome mat woven by the earth. A small fire burns at the center, its flames low and steady. A figure sits beside it, an elderly woman with a cloak wrapped around her shoulders. Her hair is white and braided, her posture relaxed, and her eyes glint with the same warmth you've seen in healers across your journey. She gestures for you to sit and hands you a cup of something steaming. The scent rises immediately, sweet, floral, soothing. Chamomile, strong and brewed long, with hints of honey and a whisper of mint. A mainstream historical fact drifts through your memory. Medieval households commonly ended their nights with simple infusions like chamomile, linden, or lemon balm. These weren't luxury substances. They were everyday comforts, gentle aids meant to nudge weary bodies toward rest. You sip slowly. Warmth spreads down your throat and settles into your chest like a tender hand. The night feels softer, the fire gentler, the world quieter. The woman picks up a bundle of herbs tied with twine. Linden flowers, pale and delicate. She crushes a few between her fingers, letting the fragrance float through the clearing. Linden was treasured for calming nerves, soothing anxiety, and coaxing breath into steady rhythm. She sprinkles some into the fire, and the smoke rises in thin silver ribbons, carrying the scent upward until it merges with the cold air above. A quirky tidbit flutters into your thoughts. Some medieval families hung linden branches above the bed to protect against nightmares or restless spirits. Whether this was superstition or simply good aromatherapy, the tradition persisted for centuries. You inhale deeply. The scent is soft, almost creamy. You can imagine someone sleeping under its branches, feeling safe under its ghostly umbrella. The woman then reveals a clay bowl filled with dried passion flower, a plant not as common, but known in some regions for promoting deep, dream-rich sleep. She crushes it lightly and sprinkles a pinch into your tea, watching it swirl through the warm water like tiny petals caught in a lazy current. She taps your chest gently, then draws a line down the center of her face. Body and mind, balance, rest. You nod, understanding without words. The fire crackles softly as she adds another log. Sparks drift skyward, rising like tiny fireflies. She takes out a small pouch and offers it to you. Inside are dried poppy petals, not the potent resin used earlier, but the mild petals often steeped into children's bedtime teas in harmless doses. She mimes a small child falling asleep gently, not heavily. A safe drift, not a plunge. Historians still argue whether such petal teas were effective or simply symbolic acts of comfort. But as you hold the petals and feel their papery softness, you understand that comfort itself is medicine. The woman reaches for her final item, a sprig of sage, its silver-green leaves catching the firelight. She waves it lightly, letting its aroma infuse the space. Sage used not only for cooking, but for cleansing the air, easing the breath, and quieting overactive thoughts. You inhale deeply, letting its warm, grounding scent nestle into your senses. She holds the sprig over the fire for a moment, then extinguishes it with a gentle press against a stone. She hands it to you like a small torch passed between generations. You sit together quietly, listening to the nighttime chorus. Whispering branches, distant owls, the murmured pulse of the stream. It feels like the village, the forest, the monastery, the tavern, the pilgrims, all of them are exhaling with you. As though this clearing is the final resting place of every remedy, every ritual, every attempt to find peace in a world filled with uncertainty. The woman finally speaks, not in words you recognize, but in a soft murmur that blends with the wind. She points to the fire, then to the sky, then to your chest. Understanding flickers. Sleep is a journey, not a fall, a transition between worlds. And medieval people, with all their herbs and tales and rituals, were simply trying to navigate that transition safely. She rises slowly, her movements fluid despite her age. She nods for you to lie back on the moss. You do. The earth feels warm beneath you. The stars overhead shimmer like pinpricks in a vast tapestry. The fire's glow softens at the edge of your vision. Your eyes close, your breath slows. Dreams whisper at the threshold. The world releases you gently into its quietest hour. The night settles softly around you now, the way a gentle blanket folds across tired shoulders. You feel the earth beneath you, warm from the fire, cool from the air, perfectly balanced as though it has been waiting for you to rest here. The breath that moves through the trees drifts over you in long, slow waves, each one smoothing the edges of the day a little more, loosening your thoughts until they soften into something light, almost weightless. The sounds you noticed earlier, the crackle of fire, the distant call of an owl, the quiet shifting of leaves, meld into a single steady background hum. Nothing sharp, nothing urgent, just a soft rhythm that guides you deeper towards stillness. You feel the herbs lingering in the air, their fragrances winding together in a gentle braid of calm. Chamomile, linden, sage, and the faintest trace of mint. Each scent settles into you slowly, with the kind of patience the Middle Ages knew well, asking nothing but offering rest. Your breath deepens again, becoming long and even, your chest rising and falling in a slow tide. The muscles in your arms, your legs, your face all release in warm ripples, one after the other, easing into a state where you no longer have to hold anything. Not even thoughts. They drift away from you, floating upward like tiny sparks from a dying ember. The night feels endless, safe, and soft enough to sleep in without hesitation. You sink further into the moss, feeling the last bits of wakefulness dissolving at the edges of your awareness. There is nothing left to do, nowhere left to go, just peace, settling around you like a final whisper.